Hello everyone, welcome to Anime No Mi, and thank you for joining us for another One Piece video. Throughout the story of One Piece, we've seen Luffy go through many victories and defeats in his adventure to become King of the Pirates. And during some of these battles, Luffy has acquired several scars on his body. Now, although these scars may not be visible, they're still there, and each one was made by a powerful enemy that were a great challenge for Luffy. And during this Wano arc, Luffy faced several enemies that could have made new scars on his body. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the scars that Luffy has managed to acquire during the Wano arc, which enemies managed to hurt Luffy during the Battle of Onigashima, and what might these next scars might be, and others that he might gain in the future. But before we get into that, if you're new to the channel, or even if you've been around for a bunch of episodes, we'd be absolutely honored if you consider leaving us a like, or even subscribing with a comment letting us know what you thought of the video. It really helps us out and motivates us to make more content. And if you'd like to help out the channel in a bigger way, consider sharing the video or the channel with a friend. Without further ado, let's get into the video. So friends, during this Wano arc, Luffy has faced off against several enemies that managed to hurt him, but none really seemed to cause serious wounds or scars on Luffy's body. Really, the only one that comes to mind, or even close to causing major injuries to Luffy, was of course Kaido. This powerful Yonko managed to hurt Luffy quite a few times during their confrontations, but most especially in the final battle between Luffy and Kaido. But let's start our conversation at the very beginning of this confrontation. As we all know, Kaido knew about Luffy long before he met him in person. In fact, he knew that he and Law were personally responsible for destroying Kaido's Smile Factory. This act stopped Kaido's plans of creating an army of pirates who possessed Zoan Devil Fruits. But even when he learned that Luffy had managed to defeat Doflamingo, Kaido didn't consider Luffy a threat, just a smaller pirate who was trying to get his attention. So Kaido didn't expect that Luffy would be a greater danger to him in the future, or even responsible for his defeat, because at that moment, Luffy's strength was no match for Kaido's. And it's for this reason that Yonko kept his cool, even though he knew that he would meet Luffy soon. After Law and the Straw Hats arrived in Wano, they began to plan their defeat of Kaido. But as they began to draw more and more attention from Kaido's crew, this informed the Yonko that Luffy was in fact in his territory. And once Kaido learned that Luffy was in Wano country, he personally went to Kuri and then sent his subordinate Jack to seek out and capture them as soon as possible. But once Kaido did in fact meet up with Luffy and they had their first confrontation, as expected, Luffy was defeated and knocked out by Kaido with just one blow from his Kanabo. From this strike of the spikes on Kaido's Kanabo, we would have seen that there would have been punctures in Luffy's bodies from the impact, thus forming the first scar Luffy acquired in Wano. After knocking Luffy out, Kaido was still incredibly impressed with Luffy's fighting spirit and ordered his pirates to arrest Luffy so that in the future he would be useful for one of his plans. He wished to therefore break Luffy's spirit to have him as a soldier within his crew. But even in prison, Kaido was unable to break Luffy's spirit. So once Luffy was able to make it through and escape from Udon prison, this allowed the Straw Hats to proceed with their plan to defeat Kaido during the event that would take place on Onigashima. So once Luffy and his allies were able to start the raid on Onigashima and go on to confront Kaido's pirates, Luffy goes after Kaido with this great immense level of determination, and they meet again to face off. During this next confrontation, Kaido was shocked to see that Luffy had been able to improve his haki and use a technique that could penetrate his huge defenses, telling Luffy that he was one of the only pirates that was able to make him actually feel pain. In the panels from that scene, you see Kaido comparing Luffy to some other very famous pirates like Edward Newgate, otherwise known as Whitebeard, and even Goldie Roger, showing that Kaido was slowly starting to recognize Luffy as a powerful opponent, so he would no longer hold back in order to defeat it. Kaido was also impressed that Luffy wasn't just being taken out in one shot as easily as he was in the first encounter, praising the young pirate for defending himself adequately against some of his stronger attacks. As he saw Luffy's spirit go bigger and bigger, Kaido began to get even more excited during the fight, no longer containing his incredible strength because he saw that Luffy's strength was growing even more during the fight. So he no longer had to hold back against Luffy. But even at this point, Kaido still didn't consider Luffy a great threat since he was still much weaker than him. His level of strength had not reached the opponents who had faced Kaido before, like Oden, who was actually able to leave a permanent scar on Kaido. But Kaido also understood that he needed to defeat Luffy before he became an even bigger problem for him in the future. Because as we've seen, Luffy has slowly acquired more and more strength through the different confrontations he's had leading up to and including Onigashima. Kaido even remarked that he regretted not having taken Luffy's life and his head earlier because he was currently becoming a major hindrance to his plans. So again, Kaido manages to hit Luffy several times on Onigashima, and it's during this exchange where he's able to hurt Luffy very badly, creating even more scars on Luffy's body through his Kanabo, as well as landing an incredible blow on Luffy, which knocked him off Onigashima and landed him in the sea that surrounded Wano. But even though he was knocked out and knocked off of Onigashima through an amazing feat and what could even be considered the voice of all things, Luffy was able to be saved and managed to recover from the fight with the help of lost pirates, and he even regained his strength again to go confront Kaido one more time. After recovering, Luffy began to think of ways to defeat Kaido, as if he didn't bring him down, the battle in Onigashima would never end. But as we also know, Luffy had had his body badly damaged and bruised after receiving several attacks from Kaido and even Big Mom, who'd helped Kaido confront Luffy, Law, and Kid. Thinking back to the training that Luffy had received from Hiragoro while being in the prisoner's mine in Udon, Luffy was able to not only increase his level of armament haki, but he had learned Ryo, which was the ability to let his haki flow, and therefore able to acquire even more powerful techniques to use against Kaido in their battle. But we see in a flashback that Luffy knew that unless he had this technique perfected, he wouldn't still be enough to defeat Kaido. So he needed to train even more to be able to face Kaido and also defeat him. So in these scenes, we see Luffy take on different weak pirates in the prison and try to perfect this new technique to feel the flow of Ryo and his haki so that he could actually do more harm and actually stand against Kaido. But after reflecting on his mistakes and thinking of ways that he could confront Kaido, Luffy goes back to where Kaido was to take him on one more time. Once Luffy returned to Onigashima and showed Kaido that he was able to strengthen his Conqueror's haki and his Conqueror's flow even more, this caused even more damage to Kaido, and realizing this increase in Luffy's strength, Kaido got even more excited about battling Luffy. For now, Kaido really saw Luffy as an opponent on the same level as him, because not only was Luffy able to defend off his attacks, but he was able to inflict great damage on his body. And Kaido even said that the battle was starting to get fun. To celebrate the fight against a finally worthy opponent, Kaido starts drinking and enters his Shoran Hake, or 8 trigrams dragon sake form, to confront Luffy. Kaido then admits that he recognizes Luffy's strength and that he is an opponent worthy of fighting, because Kaido knew that no matter how hard he went in trying everything he couldn't hurt Luffy anymore, because the battle was finally balanced between them. And it's in this way that Luffy and Kaido stayed quite a while fighting each other without showing any physical damage. But just as things seem to be getting really good for Kaido, something unexpected happens in the battle between them. In this balanced battle, someone appears to disturb the confrontation between them, and who it is CP0's main agent, who appears between Luffy and Kaido, disturbing the incredible confrontation they were having. To ensure that Luffy would have no chance of being able to defeat Kaido, the CP0 member hinders Luffy so that he couldn't defend against a heavy attack from Kaido, which allows Kaido to perfectly hit Luffy. This hit leads to an instant defeat because of the incredible attack that Kaido landed on Luffy with his Kanabo. This blow was much stronger than the previous ones, which left Luffy extremely wounded, almost losing his life. And in a moment we saw a little fear, because it looked like even Kaido didn't believe that Luffy could survive this blow, as he was able to easily knock out and injure Luffy's body. And because the blow was so much stronger than the previous ones, it made Luffy acquire an even bigger scar. And this, it seems, is the last scar that Luffy had acquired so far in Wano, because after that, Luffy was knocked out and he then managed to awaken his devil fruit, acquiring an incredible power capable of making his body even more resistant than usual. The rubbery properties of Luffy's body became all the more elastic and resistant, and allowed Luffy to withstand all of Kaido's blows, even when he was using haki to try and hurt Luffy. Kaido then switches it up and tries to use cutting attacks to injure Luffy, but Luffy manages to dodge them so that he doesn't get cut. And because his body has become all the more resistant, it's still susceptible to cutting blows like it always has been. But even so, even while dodging these sharp blows, Kaido was still able to hit Luffy several times with his Kanabo, but as we saw, none of these attacks seemed to leave a mark on Luffy. All the strikes seemed to do was just cause Luffy pain, and it's in this way that Luffy didn't earn any more scars during this Wano arc. However, we still have a couple of enemies in Wano that could still cause some injury to Luffy's body. This could possibly leave a new visible scar, just like the one Freed Admiral Akainu made on Luffy during the Battle of Marineford. And this way, another admiral would be able to cause a big scar on Luffy, making the boy in the straw hat acquire even more remnants and reminders of his battle. But with all that said, friends, I'd love to know what you think about it. Are there any other attacks that you can think of where we might have missed it and Luffy could have gotten another scar from Kaido? Let us know what you think in the comments below. So as we wrap up today's video, I want to thank you so much for watching the video all the way up to the very end. Be sure you comment on any themes or ideas that you'd like to see in future videos. And also, since you made it this far, why don't you give us a like or hit that red subscribe button before you head out to take on the rest rest of your day. I really hope to see you all in our next video, and let's keep sailing this giant sea together. Take care.